Hello, I am Crystal Petry, and welcome to another episode of the Crystal Petry Podcast. We have been following President Donald Trump's first 100 days since he was inaugurated in office in early January 2025. Here to help break down so many things that has been going on, we have national political strategist Scottie Nell Hughes. So welcome back to the podcast, Scottie.
Thank you for having me live from my guest room as I'm doing construction downstairs and we had to find a quiet place and the guest room wanted. So thank you for letting me do it so casually here in my own home.
Absolutely. You are more than welcome. So let's get into it. We have so much to talk about, and I feel like so little time. So right before we came on for this podcast, Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed by the Senate to be the newest Democratic. Hold on. Let me pull it up. Director of National Intelligence. That is it. So many acronyms. I was about to say DNI, but I'm like, people don't know what that means. Okay, Director of National Intelligence. She used to be a Democrat. Now she is a Republican. What do you feel like she can bring to that office?
Well, I think regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you don't like two things. One, losing your freedom, and two, government waste of your taxpayer dollars. Now, where we start to differentiate is what does that actually define as in America today? What Tulsi brings is that she has grown up coming from Hawaii from a Democrat perspective. So she knows what their mindset is and what their thoughts would be, and understand that she only came over to the Republican Party recently, just like, honestly, Donald Trump, RFK, many of the people that he's put in office. So they have the base where the Democrats were really good, used to be really, really good, and were known as the party that took care of the people, the party of the people. That's what she grew up in. So she's going to take that base, and it's only recently the reason why she switched over to the Republicans is because she feels like that's now what Republicans do. But don't forget her upbringing. So she's going to bring in both sides of it. And it goes to that wanting to have freedom and being able to protect freedom and personal freedoms. And I think that's what she's going to be able to bring to the office is the joy of both sides, what both sides need and focus on.
Now, her confirmation hearing was one of the more contentious hearings. I mean, I feel like they've all been, but hers were really, I feel like, filled with venom and anger. Why do you think that is?
So unfortunately, and this is something that I've had to understand personally, and I almost wish that I had ignorance is bliss, but unfortunately, we have people in power on both sides of the aisle. And that's the thing. It's not Republican. It's not Democrat. Both sides of the aisle that look at American children like GI Joes. Like little toy figures that they can send over to foreign countries to get involved in things that ultimately, it doesn't matter whether they come back in a flag draped coffin or not. Eventually, money is somehow siphoned back into their pockets. This is why people go to Washington, D.C. and they only make $180,000 salary, but they leave 4 years, 8 years, 20 years later, multimillionaires. Well, those are taxpayer dollars, Crystal. And that usually comes, more importantly, from a fear type event, a war type event, a war type scenario. You know, we're finding out. So why Tulsi was so controversial is she started calling out early on a lot of these places around the world that the United States is putting money into and putting boots on the ground in, going, one, it's none of our business. And two, the money's not actually getting to the people on the ground that need it. This aid is not getting to the people. And so she was basically calling out her own former colleagues. She was calling what we like to call the military industrial complex in DC. She's going, I'm not going to let you, A, use American children as pawns anymore, or B, continue to take American taxpayer dollars and say you're trying to help, but really you're just buying a new Mercedes with it. And that's why she was so controversial and why people don't like her that much.
Okay, so let's talk about Doge. So right now, as we are doing this podcast, they are having their Senate hearing, which is, again, very contentious, filled with venom. A lot of vulgarity is being used during this hearing. So let's talk about this. So Doge, of course, Department of Government Efficiency, has declared a war on waste. Explain to us, what is this war on waste?
Well, let's realize the United States government is in so much debt. I mean, trillions, multiple trillions of dollars of debt. There's no way we're going to pay it back. But I was listening to those hearings, and one point that I thought was very interesting came out. Every American is right now, let's just say you're financially responsible for something like $385,000 every single from you, your child. Now I laugh because I'm like, how can I be in debt for something I never spent money on? But
Right.
our representatives spent our money saying that, basically signing our name to that paycheck, each one of us, so that each of us is $385,000 in debt. To who? I don't know. I don't know who we own this to. That's a great question to get. But further point of that. So they're saying Social Security is going to be bankrupt in 8 years. 8 years.
Wow.
And that's scary. And, I have a father who's on Social Security. He gets $418 per month. That's it. His Medicare premium is more than what he pays in Social Security. So we have to supplement it on our own to pay just for him to have health insurance. And this has just been within the past year. He's been able to actually get it. And I think you're seeing a lot of Americans facing that. That's not who Doge is coming in after. If anything, Doge is wanting to go after the ones, and this is where the waste comes in. There are people who have gone in, falsified information, that do not live in the United States, that might not their age, and they are making bank off of other people's identities, people that have passed on, that identities have not been reported as dead, out of they're taking advantage of a very antiquated technological system that the United States government has. And that's who Doge is going after when they talk about going after Medicare and Medicaid. It's not going after, if anything, it's to get all of that fraud and I say the word waste, but the fraud that's happening, take that money so that they can bring it back and they can give more money to the legit senior citizens and to those that are disabled and to those that need it right now, to help them get back on their feet. That's what they're trying to do. But so what I think Doge, why it's making a lot of people angry is Doge is doing exactly what our elected representatives and senators should have been doing all along. In fact, I want to look at every person in Congress. What have I been paying you to do? Because I thought you were supposed to be responsibly spending my dollars and making sure that it was being responsibly, put to practice. Doge is coming in and saying, no, that's not what's been happening. So that's where the anger is coming from both sides on Doge. But more importantly, what their ultimate goal is to do is to alleviate the waste, the crazy spending, supposedly now there's still debate whether or not condoms were being given to those in Palestine. I that's not my world, but there's enough things that have been listed that go, why are we spending trillions of dollars on this stuff when my kid needs a tetanus shot to go to the bathroom in his public school? Here in America. So that's where I think everybody should welcome Doge. Definitely need to keep a close eye on it, just because it's not an official elected officer that's at the top. But I think this is just opening our eyes as to how much government has been wasting our money.
Why is it? Because I'm in agreement with you. I feel like even in our homes, most people have budgets, Scottie, and they want to know where their money is going, or they're looking up their bank accounts. Where's my money going? How much am I spending on Amazon? Speaking personally, how much am I spending on all of these other things? But when it comes to the federal government, we kind of turn a blind eye. And I feel like elected officials have taken advantage of that we just kind of turn a blind eye because we're trying to focus on raising our kids and working and all of these things. And now it's been thrust into the forefront that all of these years, you've been here 20, 30 years of receiving my votes and my money. And now, okay, where is that going?
Crystal, you hit the nail on the head. Let me ask you, in your house, and you mentioned your Amazon account, because I have to say, if your kids spend a penny, do you know that they've spent it more than likely? If they spend an amount of money, did you know you're looking at them?
Correct.
If you spend something, more than likely, if your husband wanted to know or if he cared, my husband and I have an agreement that anything over $500, because that's usually like a household appliance or something big, we communicate with each other on it. Underneath, groceries every week, I don't ask, the electricity bill is going to automatically come out. But if it's a $500 more purchase, he needs to know about the budget, and I need to know if he spends it. There's that accountability back and forth.
Yes.
That doesn't exist in DC. There's been nobody that has been, people could, and instead of having just one person, you'd have a group of people go in and, hey, let's get this, let's get this. But there was no one saying, no, you really don't need that right now. Or no, that isn't there a cheaper product? And most of the time that product they bought for $500 million was somehow channeled back into their back pockets or in their family members' back pocket. And that's why they're so upset right now, is that they are finally having somebody be accountable to them for everything that they have spent the last 20 years.
Wow. So also another thing that's come up during the Senate hearing on Doge, Elon Musk is not there. So that has been a big topic of conversation. The head of Doge, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency is not there to answer the tough questions. How does that make him look? How does that make this department look?
So here's a couple things. And this is what's been real interesting, because prior to Elon Musk becoming, this spearhead of the Republican Party, Donald Trump's best friend, he was beloved by the Democrats, and he was, Elon could kind of do no wrong. And
Right.
one of the big parts of this is that you have to remember, I remember one of the first interviews I watched of him publicly, he admitted that he's on the spectrum, that he is, he has some autistic tendencies, some other tendencies. I don't know if it's Tourette's, but he's got something else. So understand that, and anybody that's ever been around somebody that has been on the spectrum, they're geniuses, but you do know that there's certain trigger points that can make them not act as they should or as expected. My personal guess, my personal observation is putting him in that room, even though he did, he has had to testify before, putting him in that room with so many things rapid fire coming to him. It can't be, if you've noticed, everything Elon Musk does is pretty calculated. Everything is by the book. Even his speech yesterday in the White House, I guarantee while it seemed off the cuff, it had been, you could tell the questions had already been, here's what you're, sort of like how you sent me the questions that you were asking. He knew what was coming, so he could be in his mindset to do. You don't get that when you're in front of. And so, while, like I said, he's got a lot of power, and I'm not making excuses for him, we also have to understand he's admitted that he's got a disability that doesn't react well in high stressful situations like this. And so, nobody can discount that he's a genius. Nobody can discount that he's got business practices that definitely can produce, phenomenal results. Nobody can look at X and see what he's done and been able to streamline and bring their budget line down and reduce waste that happened to that. I think it's going to take some time to see exactly how strong Elon Musk is. But I think that's the reason, to answer your question, why he's not there in front of them, is that we got to understand and respect his limitations with a disability. It's not like he's hiding it, that he outright admitted he had.
Right. And just one more question on the Doge, on the war on waste and fraud. How do the Democrats go about defending their spending, or the wasteful spending that they've been doing for so many years? How do you defend that? How do you justify that?
Well, the easy answer would be is that the new generation of Democrats, those, the AOCs, those that have just been elected probably within the last 10 years, they go, oh my gosh, we didn't know this was happening. We knew something was bad, but we were trusting the elders of our party, the ones that have been there for 40, 50 years, and we were trusting that they had been making right decisions. They need to be just as much surprised and ready to act on this and to own it. Say, I am sorry, American people, let's get rid of it, just as much as the Republicans are. And that's my sort of my advice I've been giving to any of the younger Republicans that I've been consulting. I'm saying, nope, you say, I am sorry, Americans, we're going to take care of this now. You cannot hide that the waste is there. You cannot hide. And so if you try to say no, or try to distract from it, it's only going to make you look worse. So people like AOC, this younger generation, and we're getting better of getting some younger blood in Congress, need to say, this is a reason why we do need the Mitch McConnells, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumers, those that have been career politicians up in DC. Hold them accountable for it, because they're the ones that didn't do their job. Don't fall on a sword for them. You have a chance to make a difference, but it's going to take you not toting the party line, and more importantly, toting the American people's line and saying, this is wrong. Let's fix it, regardless if it's the Republicans that have brought it to light. Because like you said, it's really Democrats, that people that were 2 years ago were Democrats, are the ones that are exposing this.
Correct.
So each party can claim a victory about it. That's the best part. Both parties right now have an opportunity to claim victory of exposing this waste, but they've got to get away from their party lines and go for the truth and grasp the truth and over their own party.
And hopefully, for the sake of you and I and the rest of the American people, they are bold enough to do just that.
Absolutely.
but we will see. We will absolutely see. So within Doge, they are trying, or maybe they have already gotten rid of US Aid and the Department of Education. Don't we need those agencies and other agencies that they're trying to get rid of?
So the aspects of both of those, probably about 10 to 15, maybe even 20% of each one of those agencies, yes, we do need. I do believe that we do need to have somebody overseeing to make sure that the education in California is just as good as the education is in Alabama. That makes sense. The problem was somewhere along the lines, and this has been said across the board, they stopped doing that. They stopped focusing on that side of it. And yes, there were some great parts of the Department of Education when it was first established. It was definitely to help out some of the more minority communities to make sure that they were getting the equal opportunities, but they haven't done it. You cannot go into any of the inner city schools and say that those schools are just as good as the suburban schools. If that was true, then we would not have this push for the school vouchers or the school choice programs in every single state in the U.S. That's what the Department of Education should have been doing. They should have been making sure that the money and the account, because the money's been going there, but for some reason, it's not getting to the classroom. It's getting taken up in some bureaucratic mess. Instead of sending those millions of dollars, there's no excuse in 2025 that inner city Nashville, Tennessee, or Memphis, or whatever state you're in, that they do not have a school that is just as good as Brentwood, California, Brentwood, Tennessee, or any other. There's no excuse. Public education should be equal across the board right now with the millions of dollars that we've put into it. And yet we're still seeing such a disparity between the schools. And I say this as a proud public school parent. I see it in my own school. I see it within my own community, the very wealthy public school versus the very poor public school, and the what they consider to be the magnet school that's supposed to merge both of them together only takes the best and brightest out of all the schools and centralizes it. And that is a part of the broken education system that our DOE was supposed to eliminate, and it didn't. So you do kind of have to get rid of it, unfortunately, to start from scratch. What I would hope is that something would be put back in, reestablished in its place that would do that. Maybe that's more unrealistic thinking in my mind, but until then, I have to think that the states can do a better job than our national, because our nationals failed us. Since 1979, the national DOE has failed every single public school student graduate in this country, and there's no one who can defend them.
And maybe one of the things, and again, this is just me thinking that, okay, we take it out of the federal hands, put it in the state hands, but also put in some barriers that, okay, if this isn't working, we need to change this. Don't just leave it for 30, 40 years and then say, oh, it's not working, because all of the children that has come through the education system during that time, we have failed them. And they deserve more. So if we're going to move it from federal, let's put it into state, fine. But we need to make sure that state is doing what it's supposed to be doing and hold their feet to the fire when they do that.
Crystal, you grab any parent that is involved in their child's education and is involved in their child's lives, and you bring them to Congress or you bring them to your state legislature, and I promise you, you will build a better system just based off what we witnessed with our own eyes and our own children's minds across the board than you can do with any politician that is 4 levels removed from actually what is happening in the classroom. And that is, even our local school boards, and I don't know where it is where you live, it's frustrating me. I appreciate people running for office, but I want people whose kid is in that school right now, who is dealing with the issues right now that is happening.
Absolutely.
So there's not something that they felt like, well, when I was in school in 1970, I don't care. Okay.
It's a different school.
It's a different school. Yes, my kid does need an iPad in his hand in order to compete with other schools. Yes, internet connectivity is extremely important. Yes, I get why teachers don't want cell phones in the classroom. However, cell phones are accountability. And when, let's teach them how to responsibly use them when they are needed. But that's accountability. When something bad happens in the school, yes, I want my kid to have their phone to be able to text.
So they can call.
Something is going on here. That is the only way that we can know some of these things are happening. So I am very, very tired of these, bureaucracies, but especially when it comes to our children, being built by people who have no clue what is actually happening in our classroom, in our hallways, whether you're talking about kindergarten or high school.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of times, those people that are making decisions, their kids didn't even go to public school
Yeah.
at all. They were homeschooled or private school or something like that. They never even stepped foot in a public school. So how can you make the best decision?
Yeah. And how can you make my child just as competitive with a private school kid? We just dealt with Tennessee last week. Everybody's praising. Well, I don't say everybody. The legislature, even Donald Trump praised we had this school choice bill get passed.
Okay.
And I fought with our local legislator. She's like, Scottie, why aren't you defending this? You're a Republican. We need your voice. And I said, I can't defend it because you took $7,000 for every kid that goes to private school out of the bank, the cushion that was supposed to be used for public schools. And as long as my kids, when we're having to accumulate so much debt in order for my kids to be in the marching band or to be on the dance team or to be on the football team, yet you just took $7,000 and sent it to a school where it's already $30,000 and the parents don't blink to send their kids there. That $7,000, just means that they'll raise their tuition $7,000 more. $7,000 to my kid would be huge. If you would just write me a check, $7,000, and at the end of the year, I will give you the receipts of what I used $7,000 for in my local school, I guarantee you would have a lot more. You'd have better school system than you would have just taking that money and giving it to a private school. That's what we're dealing with in so many states right now.
I'm telling you, Scottie, you would have my vote on that. Write me the $7,000 check and I will show you and I will give you a return on your investments.
Absolutely.
I will absolutely give that to you. Let's talk about the birthright issue. It has been everywhere. It was one of the first things that President Trump did when he was elected into office. And he really explained, because a lot of people don't know the origin of the birthright citizenship. So he really explained it. And, I commend him for that birthright citizenship was for slaves and their children born here in the United States. It was never intended for everyone else to partake or take advantage of that. It was solely for slaves and their children initially, but of course it's grown to what it is now. President Trump is getting a lot of pushback from different federal judges blocking that. What are your thoughts on this birthright citizenship issue?
Well, first of all, I never like to assume what another community should be doing, but I do know that if I was if I was a descendant of a slave in America, I would be very upset because my family would have been brought here against their will. Mm-hmm. They would have been brought here for forced labor, a very horrible part of American history. And you take away from one of the few things that our government tried to do to make it right. And the people who are coming over here by choice and are coming over here, they are taking advantage of something that I believe that those slaves, they built. That was there for their generations to stay here. This was one small little, we're sorry we did something really horrible to your family. Let us at least try to make it right for you. And by far doesn't. But those that are coming over here illegally are taking advantage of that. And they're disrespecting that move right there. So let me, that's my first point on that. So that being said, I do think that on the one hand, I understand if a family came over here seeking true asylum, that they were afraid for some reason that they were going to be abused in their home country, that they were under threat, and they had a baby over here. Absolutely. I think you cannot do any sort of immigration reform without doing citizenship reform as well, which means making it an easier legal way that people can legally. My husband runs a construction business. His head of his crew for laying down the floors disappeared the last 3 weeks. We could have no idea where he went. We're like, what is going on? I'm like, Chris, are you sure he's a citizen? He was from El Salvador. He said, I know, we've got his papers. Like we make sure our crews are. So he just came in, 2 days ago. And so Chris asked me, like, where were you? He says, I had to go back to El Salvador. It wasn't for me, but it was for my wife and my child, I had to make sure that their paperwork was covered.
Okay.
And that's where he says, do you understand it costs at least $10,000 to $20,000 to become an American citizen?
It's so expensive.
It's horrible. And these are people that, and if you go through that, and I get, these are people that really do want to make our communities better, for however they got here. If they immediately try to apply, but it is wrong. And what you have, and this is another thing people don't talk about, you have a lot of folks in the legal community who take advantage of these people. They come in and say, you know what, you pay me money, I will handle your citizenship. They work hard, and they give them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
And they never get it.
And the lawyers just disappear. And these folks are stuck. They can't go to the police because they're here illegally. They can't ask for appeal on that. And they've just lost the year's worth of work. So there are so many, we need to, and that's why Trump in 2016 said, we need to build a big, beautiful door and make sure that we make it so that people can come through it, those that actually want to be here. And I do believe, I know lots of amazing folks that had to use non-traditional ways to getting here because they were escaping the hardships in their country. But let's make it easy for them to become American citizens. I do believe that they do deserve to be here. That's what America is a place of refuge for those. And what we're doing is we're making it, the criminals are winning and the good people are losing in this deal. And we need to flip that switch with this argument that's happening.
Oh my goodness, you are, yes. It's so expensive, and the red tape, all the paperwork and all of everything that you have to go through to become an American citizen, you can kind of understand why people are not. We need to make it easier, more expensive. Less expensive. Let's take away some of this red tape and its paperwork if we really want people to come in legally.
You're 100% right. But that same thing exists in, like I said, Social Security, just getting my father through Social Security. My mother passed 2 years ago, and her death benefits did not come through until January. And we had to go in front of a judge because they still didn't claim her tax filings. Like the level, and this is, I think, we're bring back to our earlier conversation, why DOJ is so important. Yes. People justified their jobs by putting a layer of paperwork in. So every person that had, it's like, I need to justify my job, even if it's only 4 hours a week, I'm going to put another layer of paperwork in. And then I'm going to put another layer of paperwork in. And by the end of it, just with immigration, Social Security, FAFSA, you have 10 layers that you could literally eliminate to just one. And it's better for the consumer, for the citizen, and it's better for the government.
Yes. And if you are really for the American people, if America is first for you, and of course that's, Trump's slogan now, but if America is first for you, you want to make it easier. Yes, legal, but easier for us to get FAFSA, for us to get death benefits and Medicaid and Social Security and all of these other things.
It's what we want. And that's what makes America great. That is what makes, and this, I know this, for some reason, Congress for the last 20 years, 30, 40 years doesn't know it, or they've chosen to ignore it, or they know it, but they realize it's to their disadvantage to acknowledge it. And that's why I think you have someone like Trump in office. Now, the harder part, and it's been a lightning quick. I mean, the media has no idea where to look. Every day they have 80 different places to go after everything. What I don't want to see happen is I don't want the little granny to get somehow caught up in this net and she finds herself kicked off Social Security because someone stole her identity 20 years ago. That's what I'm very fearful of. I get that there's this huge net of corruption, but you're going to have a percentage in there that are good. And that's what I'm very worried. I want to make sure that you have people on hand ready to, when someone says, hey, you did this wrong to me, I'm legit.
Let's fix
that are
it.
going to be able to get back on. That's where I fear this great, sweep through is going to unfortunately hurt some of the good innocent people. And I'm just hoping that we've got the people ready to get them to be able to help them when that situation occurs.
Let's talk about the tariffs. That's been I feel like everything President Trump is doing it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So President Trump is stating that he is going to raise tariffs on several countries, but Mexico and Canada are kind of at the top of that. What are your thoughts on tariffs? Because will it be a blowback to the American citizen if he does raise tariffs on these other countries?
So here's the problem with all this. First of all, if you've been to the grocery store, it is not cheap. Oh my gosh.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. $9 eggs. People are saying they don't want roses for Valentine's Day this year. They want a dozen eggs.
Eggs. Yes.
Not gonna lie to you, kind of in that same boat right now. And that so Trump campaigned on the price of lowering the price, lowering inflation.
He did.
Unfortunately, I don't think, or he knew going into it, it's almost like this short-term, I don't want to say short-term pain for long-term gain. So what we've done over the last 4 years, but definitely even over the last 20 years, is we've incentivized all of these American companies to go out of America to manufacture their goods. And that's why we have all of these empty industrial warehouses. That's why we have all these, especially middle America, you have a lot of the manufacturing moved out of the country. And then they were able to sell their goods back in America for cheap because cheap labor. Also, you're dealing with in these other countries like China and India, you do not have the standards that we hold our workers. You know, our joke is for the kids that don't make the Olympics, they end up in the Sheen factory in China. And that's a joke, but it's also kind of true. They don't have the same standards that we have here in America for our workers over there. So they can, it's in almost a version of slavery that exists, and we've heard of it. So how do you balance that out? You've got to, Trump is trying to incentivize those companies to come back to America, number one, and to manufacture in America, saying, if you come back over here, I promise you, your goods are going to cost the exact same by the time that it's all said and done that it would be for you to stay in Mexico and ship your goods back in. I'm going to make it so expensive that you might as well come back here and manufacture it here and it'll be the same price. Does that help the American consumer right here? Not in the short term. And you get it, but your two options of getting a country to make things equal and fair is tariffs economically or militarily. And so I would much rather handle it right now economically than him say, okay, fine, we're going to invade your country and take it over. I don't really think that's a good course in today's day and age, but I do see what he's trying to do. And if somebody like Trump, it doesn't matter if eggs are $9 an hour. He's still going to have his egg Benedict in the morning. It matters to you and I, who's just trying to make a simple scrambled egg. Yes. We know that egg just cost me $3 for my scrambled egg. And that's where he's got to be very careful in this balance of it. But I see what he's doing. Mm-hmm. It needs to be done, but he's really just trying to get these companies incentivized to come back here, because if you bring them back here, not only are you making the products here, but you're employing the American workers, you're getting them off the government welfare, you're revitalizing some of these towns that have become ghost towns over the last 10 years. You're bringing back pride into communities because you're bringing back money back into communities. Those things need to happen. And I don't think there's any easy way to do it.
Couple more questions for you, Scottie, then I'll let you go. So President Trump has signed an executive order changing the name of Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What are your thoughts of this? And is this even a priority? Should it be a priority?
I mean, it was with a stroke of a pen. It wasn't something that, I think anybody elected him specifically to do. Does it make sense? Absolutely, because it's not Gulf of the United States of America. It's the Gulf of America, which includes all the countries in South America. Correct. What this did, though, and I've heard this from multiple people, and unless you actually are talking or watching Ecuadorian or you're watching Venezuelan or you're watching Brazilian media, they loved this because for so long, any of those countries, those ring countries, always felt that they were losing out, that Mexico had just claimed it. So they actually thought this was a really good move for them because they feel like all of them now can claim that area, especially if they had countries that were border, Mexico was only a small percentage of all the countries that actually were in the Gulf. Was this one of his priorities that I think he should have, I think it's just another one of those. I think psychologically, it sent a message to his foes saying, if I can change names on a map, mm-hmm. what else am I going to do? Like, don't test me. Let's just keep going. Don't try me. Like, if I've got Google Maps having to reprint everything and change
Google
the
Maps is absolutely doing that.
Then what else? I'm not afraid to go after anything, whether it's small or big. I think that was also psychologically, I think, what the move was about.
Mm-hmm. My final question for you, Scottie, I follow you on your socials, and maybe a month or two ago, you put on one of your socials that Democrats made people love Republicans. Do you remember this?
100%. I still stand by it.
Explain that, please.
Well, it's the same reason why we're having to get rid of the board, why the Board of Education is being eliminated, and why Doge was, renamed or created. If Democrats would have stuck to be the party that they used to be, the party that put the American people first, then you would not have seen Trump. They made Trump. People were so frustrated, just like George W. Bush era gave us President Obama, because people saw that hope after being through, even after 9/11, they saw just pure no faith in the American dream at all under George W. Bush. So when you had somebody like President Obama with just that energy and that passion and speaking of hope, absolutely. That's why you saw so many crossover and vote. Same thing happened with Trump. People were so disparaged, had no, they knew that they were paying more, their bank accounts, their job security, everything. They had to have a change. And that was under the Democrats watching, which I'm still going to put a large group of Republicans caused it as well. That gave us Trump. Trump brought in an independent. Was a Democrat, but I was also a Republican. But then I was a Democrat, but then I was a Republican. That made people go, okay, he's listening to what's right about both sides of the parties, and that's who he's going to create. So I do believe that we would not have had Trump if you would have seen a successful 4 years under Biden. Biden should have been, or whoever was Kamala Harris, whoever they put forward, normally should have been reelected, but it was so bad. Just like the reason why we got Biden was because Trump was so bad, the COVID year and how he handled COVID and what he did, that gave us Joe Biden. Same thing happened again in this case.
Right. Which is why we love the democratic process.
Absolutely.
If you don't do well, we go on to the next person.
And that's what and that's actually something great about America that unfortunately other countries don't have that freedom, and why we have to protect it so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scottie, so much for being back on the Crystal Petry Podcast. We always love you. I always love you.
Anytime. Thank you for letting me for my guest room.
Absolutely. And to my audience, to my viewers, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get Scottie's podcast on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on what's going on with President Trump in his first 100 days and how that will affect you and your family in your household. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.